Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod as we review the second test. Alan Quinlan alongside me. Alan, you were there in the MCG, over 90,000. What a game and what a finish. Hugo Keenan writes himself, as do all the players in the Lions history books. They've won the series with a test to spare. First time they've done that since 1997 in South Africa when they'd gone 2-0 up. Just describe sort of the sense of the occasion, but also when Keenan scored that try. Like, it's an unbelievable achievement for the group, but particularly for him. You know, what was he? Blackrock, under 14 Bs, that's been talked about, but not even that. How he's come through the 7 system, then into the Ireland system. And also, at the start of this tour, he actually wasn't well, so he's done remarkably well as well.
Yeah, the first part is, the atmosphere was amazing. It was... What a stadium the MCG is. They do tours there every day. A lot of people from our group went there. We went there for a tour. It's an unbelievable stadium. You know, it can hold up to just over 100,000 people. There was 90,300 and something at the match, which was phenomenal. It's strange because I suppose everybody expected the Australians to come back a bit and they didn't disappoint. They played brilliantly. So the anticipation, we headed out in the tram from our hotel in the inner city in Melbourne, absolutely jam-packed as you can imagine, thousands and thousands of people walking along the streets. It was obviously, it's a big circular stadium, so there's kind of a pathway, big wide pathways that you can walk all around to get your gates and stuff, and just the singing and the chanting there and the banter between the Australian fans and the Lions was great to see. It just had a different feel to it this week for obvious reasons. I think Brisbane was, you know, the atmosphere and the build-up was great. There was great excitement to the first test, of course, but I think the way the first half panned out in that first test, the crowd went quiet. The Lions fans were, you know, obviously singing and chanting, but not to the point that there was any sort of jeopardy. There was a lot of dominance from the Lions in that first half. Role reversed this time, you know, obviously, you know, with Australia going 23-5 up, it brought, you know, great excitement and shock, I suppose, first and foremost with the Lions fans, but then they came back just before halftime. Tom Curry's try, Hugh Jones' try, and they're right back in it. So, you know, they're going in at half time and everyone is kind of has the nails bitten off themselves, really. It was great, and it was brilliant that Australia stepped up to the plate. I wasn't surprised. We all thought they'd be better this week, I think, given, you know, they would have reviewed the match last week, had a match under their belt. There's no doubt about it. The Australians were undercooked coming into the first test. They played one game against Fiji. In an ideal world, they'd have 3 or 4 matches under their belt. The Lions, you know, their preparation has been perfect, really. They've had a big build-up, started in Dublin on the 20th of June, which is a long time ago, really, when you think about it. So, yeah, it had a great atmosphere to the game, and credit to Australia for that, because the expectation from some was that the Lions would be dominant again, but they played their part massively, and, you know, in the 79th minute, the Lions for the first time in the game go ahead and win the game. So it went right to the 80th minute. It was phenomenal. It was full of action, full of quality. Some great skills from both sides, and, you know, the unfortunate thing for Australia is they can't take it to the Sydney next week for a decider, which, you know, for some people, you know, that would have been a great situation if we were going to Sydney for a decider. But credit to the Lions and credit to Andy Farrell and his coaching staff. They've obviously got a lot of resources and, you know, had huge backing to put this whole puzzle together, but he had to manage it and steer it, and he had to make all the calls and decisions on his staff. A few question marks about it being a lot of Irish people involved, huge number of Irish players involved, but he's managed this group excellently, and he backs players that have delivered before, delivered before for him, particularly the Irish guys. But they were all there on merit, I think, and top quality international players. And I think where some of the question marks came in was because Ireland had a little bit of a dip towards the end of the Six Nations, but they all performed, and they performed brilliantly for him. And I think for the challenge was always going to be for the Lions this week was to deal with that onslaught that was coming from Australia. They're probably undercooked from a match practice point of view, but probably depth in certain positions. And you saw the impact that that Rob Valentini made, and Will Skelton, and even getting Langy Gleeson back in the bench. What an impact he made. Those players going off, both their props got injured at half time. Before half, in that first half, Slipper and Alatoa. So they had to deal with a bit there, and their performance was superb, really. And as I said, you think when there's pressure on, I remember around the 72nd minute, and even if you remember Russell kicks to the corner from a penalty to the Toje one, you felt that Lions are going to squeeze over here, and they're going to find that comfort with 10 minutes to go. But Australia came up with a big turnover, and part of me just felt it was Australia's night, but credit to the Lions, they never gave up, never stopped, and they showed a lot of calmness and composure. I think Finn Russell, he was asked about the drop goal situation after the game, and he just I don't think it was probably in his mind slightly that they were going to set up for it, but he gives that pass to Hugo Keenan. He cuts back inside and then goes again and makes the pass to Hugo Keenan, and what a finish. You mentioned Hugo there 12 months ago. He was coming out of Paris, really disappointed after Ireland's exit from the sevens. He was ill for a couple of period of this tour as well. A lot of people were tipping Blair Kinghorn to have that full back jersey. So he started both tests, and to get the winning try like that in the series is a phenomenal moment. So yeah, full of action, Stuart. Great fun, great enjoyment, great buzz about the place. But I felt for Joe Schmidt and the Australian team. They were in our hotel.
You talked about Hugo Keenan, 79th minute, just before he goes over. The biggest talking point of the game, Carlo Tizzano, Jack Morgan. So much discussion. Joe Schmidt, one side, Wayne Barnes is out this week, Nigel Owens, Piardi, seems the collision, which we'll get into, the law 9.2 states a player must not charge into a ruck or maul without binding onto another player. It also states that making contact above the line of the shoulders with an opponent is dangerous play and prohibited. They had a good discussion. The try was awarded. There's no better person to ask than a back row himself. The way the game's going, Alan, I'm not sure what Jack Morgan could do, get any lower, but Tizzano was as low as you could be. It was pretty equal in how they collided. You've got one side, Phil Wallen-Smith, saying it's definitely a penalty against Jack Morgan, as you would expect. It denies us a third test and a series winning test, whoever wins that game. The other side, Andy Farrell, I'm sure, is thinking, yep, great call, and so's the referee, and that's the decision. It's gone. We chuck the balls up in the air. What does Alan Quinlan say about it?
I don't know if I'm the best person to talk about just because I played in the back row, but I remember Brodie Retallick had one. Was it last summer or season before against Japan? He got sent off. Some similarity to that. He kind of dived into the ruck, hit the Japanese player in the back of the head, got a straight red for it. I think initially I thought he's in trouble here. And then when you see the replay and you hear the explanation of Piardi, I think Piardi says that they both arrived at the same time. They actually didn't. Tizzano was there.
Yeah, Morgan's just behind him.
Yeah, he was just a half a second ahead of him, wasn't he, Tizzano? So I think if you go into the letter of the law situation where the contact is made. But look, I don't know what you're supposed to do anymore in the modern game. The croc roll is gone, which is fair enough because there was players getting injured from that, and it was dangerous regarding lower limb injuries and stuff like that. I think if a player gets in that position that low, it's impossible to move them. I think he just gets there after him, and he's very, very low. Jack Morgan as well, and I know the law states that your head is not supposed to be below your hips, but sure, look, that never happens in a breakdown. If that was pulled, you'd be stopping players at every breakdown. But if you go into the letter of the law thing, it's possibly a penalty and possibly a yellow card. There's no intent from Jack Morgan. He doesn't dive off his feet. So I'm very much divided in the point that it could go either way. If this was given as a penalty, of course, there'd be, from the line side, there'd be uproar. The vast majority of people, I would say, who are non-Australian think there's nothing wrong with it, and what else was Jack Morgan supposed to do? And I feel the same. I think I agree that it could easily have been a penalty. Am I strong and it was my opinion very strong in the sense that, I think it was a penalty? No, I'm 50-50 on it, Stuart. It's one of those ones that could go either way. And when there's that kind of uncertainty, essentially, it's a big, big call. Is that where
our game is just at, Alan? There's so
many interpretations,
it can go like that, and it could
well,
go the other side. I'm sure it's not. That can't be good for the game. But is there any way of sorting that out?
If you think back a year or two, Stuart, ago, maybe the last 3 or 4 years in the game, 5 years or whatever, it could be probably 6-7 years when this head contact situation came into play. Any sort of collision, accidental or not, or intentional, players are getting yellow carded, red carded. It's moved on to a more common sense approach now, and it's that. And also the 20-minute red card mitigates it down a little bit in the sense that if there's an accidental shoulder on head, that it may stay a yellow card, or else if you have the 20-minute, if you have the red card, by the TMO, is it? If he goes off for that 20-minute red card, you get a player back in the field. So it's kind of, there's a more common sense approach to accidental collisions, or rugby collisions as we call them. There's still some grey areas, isn't there? I think most people, and I, I'm trying to see what other people think as well, because am I right in saying the vast majority of ex-referees and ex-players think that Jack Moore, it was okay and they came to the right decision?
Yeah, I think with referees we need to be careful because, and rightly so, most of them would back each other, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and the vast majority, everyone has an opinion, and I think you're spot on by the 50-50, which is very an interesting and intriguing place to be for our game, especially. But I think, rugby collision, but what's that define as well? That's opinionated too.
And it's not me trying to, am I offending one side or the other here? I always try and make these calls myself on what I feel and what your opinion is, and kind of back yourself. If you feel something, if you feel it's wrong, or if you feel there's foul play, and other people don't, it doesn't really matter. You just back your own opinion. My opinion here is this is a 50-50 one. It's so marginal. But as I said, if they did disallow the try and give Australia the penalty, well, we'd be having the same debate. I'd still be 50-50 on it. I think it's such a big call in the magnitude of the impact of that decision is it gives Australia the victory. It went their way in a sense that another referee in the day could say there was contact there, and I think that's the one inaccuracy that's there, is they didn't arrive at the same time. Tizano was there before him. It might be 0.2 or 3 of a second, who knows? But look, I don't think there was any malicious kind of recklessness out of Jack Morgan, because you're not going to do something crazy like that. I think it was just urgency to get there. He probably saw the threat of Tizano coming and the possibility of that ball being turned over, and he won a Lions tour essentially for the Lions, because if he doesn't get there and clean him out there, Tiziano locks onto the ball. He had that turnover 5, 6, 7 minutes before that, the one where Russell went to the corner and they tried them all over, and there was a couple of rucks, and he had a brilliant turnover. So, yeah, it's a big talking point, but people's opinions are split on it, really. The vast majority, I think, and we have to kind of respect their opinions as well. And it probably, for me to say it's probably the right decision is I don't know if that's even right. I just don't know. I think it could have went either way.
What about these games? 2017, we make a deal when Roman fought New Zealand against the Lions. It's a very different situation. If we talk about the game in total, Alan, so many Irish players, as you said, starting, justified. Andy Farrell gets the right results. But if we actually look at the non-Irish players, Genge coming off the bench, Russell starting, Curry, they were massive and paramount to these wins, weren't they? And plenty others.
Of course they were. Well, Genge comes on, and after, I think he gets a penalty, second scrum he's on. Jack Morgan was really good. I think Owen Farrell brought a presence as well. Didn't have a lot to do. Blair Kinghorn had a couple of moments where he nearly got away. But they brought energy, and that's what you want from the bench. James Ryan as well. He was heavily involved in a lot of carries, tackles. Will Stuart made a lot of carries towards the end of that game in important moments. So, yeah, of course, that's what you want from your bench. I think the possibly an issue for Australia was the two props getting injured. They wouldn't wanted to make two changes at half time. So essentially two props and a back row go off at half time. If they could have got Rob Valentini to 55, 60 minute mark, it would have been great. And the props maybe to get him into the 50s or closer to the 50 mark. And they could have went like for like then with the changes. But yeah, they have that bit more depth. It's 4 countries here, do you know what I mean, against one, and that's the reality. And Australia are they're lacking a bit of explosive power. They haven't had that in Valentini and Skelton, but Skelton, I'm not even sure if he's available I don't think he's available now for the Rugby Championship because of his commitments in France. They go to South Africa the week after next, Australia, for 2 tests against South Africa. So, yeah, a little bit of depth is an issue for them. But I think the way they played, Jake Gordon at scrum half was outstanding. He was just absolutely brilliant. I think if Australia win that game, he's player of the match. They all stepped up. Fraser McWright, Nick Frost ran the lineup brilliantly. One of the main issues for them, one issue for them, not the main issue, is their maul didn't really function. They didn't really have a maul, and if you're looking for forward dominance, lay a platform, having a strong maul is fantastic. You might only use it a couple of times in a game, but they didn't really get any sort of upper hand there as regards mauling against the Lions, and it didn't help them. But Ikito was brilliant, Suali, Tom Wright, brilliant in attack, brilliant when Gordon scores a try and Wright, sorry, they just the period there when they, Slipper scored the first one on 22nd.
That 8-minute period of 3 tries.
Yeah, there was 3
Slipper,
tries there, and
Gordon, and then Wright scored. But Swaley's last break was remarkable.
No, the Lions would probably look back and say Jake Gordon's try was just a defensive error. I think the Suali one stepping back inside, Bundy Aki, they're down to 14 men there. They're a little bit isolated. That was just brilliance from him as well. I think Slipper one was the hard work, picking and going, one-off runners, working the blind side. Really, really, they muscled up there well.
Yeah, but, they got gain line from their one-out runners.
They did, yeah. They were. I think their breakdown was a bit more ferocious and accurate, and they'd negated any sort of ability for the Lions to slow it down. So they got quick ball, and that gave them opportunities to run, and they found little pockets, little offloads. The Lions missed 40 tackles in the game, but they did score 5 tries to 3, which was significant, really, and obviously it was significant they both missed two conversions, Lina and Russell. So what a game it was! Incredible intensity, and for the Lions to win right at the end like that, really, really special. Wrap up the series. Heartbreak for Australia, and they came back they were in our hotel. I didn't chat to Joe on Saturday night. I met Laurie Fisher for a few minutes. I was chatting to him. And to be fair to Laurie, he coached in Munster. I know him really well. He's forwards coach with Australia. He was pragmatic. He just kind of said about the decision, look, it is what it is. There's nothing we can do now. We can't change it. But he was really happy and proud of the way they played and the way they turned up and muscled up and brought intensity and emotion. But he was able to pick out a couple of things that's, like any coach would or any team, after you lose, there's always things. Even when you win, there's things you can work on. But the overriding feeling was that they put in a real shift, and they did, and they should have been very proud of that performance. But they're coming up against the Lions team, and this goes right back to who's going to start the first test, who's not. You could make 7 or 8 changes in the team for next week, and the team is still incredibly strong. It's a very, very powerful Lions squad. So many arguments for so many players that could start. So yeah, they came up against a juggernaut who found a way in the end to win, and they came right back. Australia couldn't do that the week before, just underpowered a little bit, but what a match it was.
Yeah, you say that as an occasion. It seemed to be unbelievable. You were there firsthand, but also for the Wallabies in general and the Rugby Nation, they needed that close contest. Yes, they won't take much by the fact they didn't win the game, but as a Rugby Nation and going forward, that was absolutely much needed for them. And Alan, if we look ahead to Saturday in Sydney, you'll be going again. Lions going for 3-0 whitewash. Last time they'd done that was in 1927 against Argentina, and they've only done it a couple of times. So will that be the marker for Andy Farrell, saying you guys are going to be complete heroes and people will remember you if you go down to Sydney and put on another performance and come home without being beaten across the tour, apart from that one match in Dublin against Argentina?
Yeah, I think so.
And what changes can you maybe see?
I don't know about changes. Look, there's a couple of places like, Joe McCarthy could come back in the second row. Mac Hansen could come into the back three. Kinghorn could start over Hugo Keenan just to give him a test start. Ty Burn has played some amount of rugby this year. He was outstanding again, wasn't he? You could easily bring in Ben Earl to start, Van der Fleer. There's a number of players there that you could bring in that you could change the front row for the bench front row very easily. Who knows? Cowan Dickey could be involved. There's so many permutations here of players, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's going to make 10 changes. Could be wrong. It'll still, if he did, it'll still be a very strong Lions team. But I think that bit of cohesion that they built up from these 2 test matches now, they'll want to finish strong.
Don't want to be ruthless, as you say.
And we don't know the conversations that were had essentially with Jack Morgan over Tom Curry. So maybe Andy Farrell would have sat down with him and said, look, he wasn't in the 23 for the first game. Maybe he says, look, maybe he goes, you know what, there's very little between these 2 players. They're 2 unbelievable open sides. Maybe he starts Jack Morgan now and says, Tom Curry, your job is done. Thank you. You were outstanding. Ben Earl, his stats leading up to the first test were the best of all the back rowers. Jack Conan's done a brilliant job, 24 tackles in the match the other night. Again, works his socks off, has had a brilliant tour. Not a lot of big carries for like Ty Byrne was the biggest carrier for the Lions at the weekend with 11 carries. Hugo Keenan was behind him with 8. Then Jack Conan with 7. So the Lions didn't really have a lot of punching and carrying. Only probably when they got into the 22s that time when, Sheehan gets to try at the start there, they had a bit of pressure.
We're defending for so long.
Yeah. And then they kicked a fair bit when they had to. There was a lot of box kicks and Russell kicked a fair bit as well. But they didn't have a lot of possession. I think Australia had 55% possession, and the Lions had more territory, 52%, and that was probably based, a lot of that territory was the second half. So again, yeah, you just don't know. Gary Ringrose, you could change the two centres, couldn't you, and put Tupolotto and Gary Ringrose in there this week. Does that kind of weaken the team? You know, not at all. The only risk about making any sort of changes here is the fact that you might lose that bit of zip and that bit of buzz. But it comes down to fatigue, bangs and knocks. Certain guys would have been strapped together playing these matches. So I suspect Andy Farrell will be going as strong as he can and not making a huge amount of changes here.
And for Australia, yes, the Rugby Championship to look forward to, but there's so much pride in that jersey, that gold jersey, that they'll want to end this one, as they all say, on a high, but not come out of there saying the Lions whitewashed us.
Yeah, and the thing for them is, you know, to
and as
kind of
time
get
goes
over.
on, you expect them to be able to be better because
yeah.
even though they were brilliant last Saturday, but you talked about getting more and more games, you know, line at 10, Gordon at 9, more time in the saddle and getting cohesion right.
Yeah, the problem they have now is, I think there are two props that went off at half week, Slipper and Alatoa. They're both in danger of missing out in this test match. So that really kind of, the third test, that really kind of makes them dip into the Aidan Ross has been called in. I think he's been capped twice by New Zealand.
Their depth
and that Irish tour, he's since gone to the Queensland Reds, and he's eligible for Australia now. So he's been called into their squad. So that they've issues there. Tanielo Tupou, he may start at tight end this week because they're down that's an area where they've issues and problems. So, but I expect them. I think the challenge for them, Stuart, now is the psychological kind of damage. How impactful that is. Can they pick themselves up again? Because, as you said, they're going to South Africa the following week, to prepare. So 2 weeks after this Saturday, they'll be playing in Joburg against South Africa. So they've got to try and keep things going, be positive, pick themselves up, and it would be an incredible finish for them to win a test here and say, well, look, we came so close here of winning the second one, and maybe, you know, the gulf that people expected isn't there, and we can build on that and take positives, you know. So yeah, huge determination from both sides, and that's the intrigue of this week. You know, Andy Farrell will want that clean sweep. Joe, you know, he's coming to the last, you know, 6 months of his tenure as Australian coach, and he'll want to try and finish this last block of matches on a high for himself as well. And but yeah, they were outstanding. So if they can build on that, they're not going to be too fatigued. Not going to be too fatigued, you think? But if they can get it right this week, it'll make for a great test in Sydney.
Yeah, just as I asked that, actually, I was thinking, I sort of said, do you expect them to be better? Maybe I do, but that actually might be a big stretch because of all the emotion and energy that they put out, a couple of days ago.
Yeah, of course, it's a challenge for them because the couple of injuries, you know, will Valentini be available again? And if he is, great, because he was brilliant for him in that first half. Will Skelton be, you know, he went off because he was fatigued and hasn't played a lot recently. And Langdeet Leeson, as I said, was brilliant. Parecki being back was a big boost for him as well at hooker. So they have a couple of injuries. If they can get some players in there with a real hunger and add to it, I think, they can try and, you know, that's the challenge, pick themselves up. And if they were to win the game on Saturday night in Sydney, they'd feel brilliant about themselves heading to the Rugby Championship. And I said that, as I said, that's the narrative. You then say, well, we won the third one and we possibly could have, or maybe should have, if we managed the game better, won the second one. So we're not as bad as maybe people were predicting, and the gulf of the difference isn't there. But, you know, if you think about the Lions concept, it is 4 countries coming together. That's against one country. And, you know, it's usually You have very little weakness in that opposition team, that line situation. I think the quality of this line squad was an incredibly high, and Australia made them look ordinary at times the other night, but they showed great character, great determination, and found a way to win at the end. So they deserve a lot of credit. They had a big night Saturday night. They had a big day Sunday, nursing hangovers today, and but they'll bounce into training this week, the Lions. It'll be a light week for both squads, very light week, because the physical toll of the first two games. But the Lions will bounce into training even after having their few beers. They have the job done. The job is then to switch back on and make sure. So yeah, I think you could look at it both ways around changes. Will he freshen things up and bring in a few guys who are hungry and excited to get a test cap? Or will he kind of say to the guys that have played, you've got us this far, take us home now, take us to a 3-0 series win. That's what he'll want. So the more you kind of read papers, listen to interviews out in Australia here, you get the feel that, God, there's still a bit to play here. On Saturday night when you left the stadium, and Sunday maybe you're thinking, oh, it's going a bit flat. But there's a little bit of bite to this, and I think Australia will certainly try and come out fighting at the weekend again. So hopefully we get a great test match.
Well, that's exactly what we want. And the photo of the Lions all celebrating in their seats in the MCG is what it's all about. Looked such an occasion. A final one from you, Alan. I want to get your prediction, but also how much of a stain would it be if the Lions didn't make it 3-0? Will it gloss this tour much for them, or is it, yes, the bonus is 3-0, but we have come out here to win a series and we've achieved it just like we did back in 2013?
I think the biggest thing is win the series, and you've done that, and it doesn't really put any sort of stain on. I think because Australia aren't as strong as they have been at times before, and that's been fair and respectful to them. They probably know that themselves. We're basing that on the evidence we've seen in the last 18 months to 2 years, where they had a really poor World Cup. They've shown some moments, to be fair, of improvement, and particularly in the Rugby Championship last summer, the November series, the win in Twickenham, they ran Ireland close. We've seen moments, but we haven't seen consistent, a long run of wins or stuff like that. So I think there's the job for Les Kiss when he takes over is to try and add to what Joe's done. And I think Joe's done a really good job given where they were at the World Cup, because they were dreadful. He's done a really good job, and geez, watching that team the other night at times, their skill set, their pace to their game was fantastic. So they can only get better if they channel it in the right way. So it's hard to probably predict now until we see the teams. I think when we got the teams last Thursday and you hear Valentini's in, Skelton's in, Parecki's in, Langeet Leeson's on the bench, because he's an outstanding player as well. You think, whoa, that kind of changes things up a little bit with that power coming back. So we just got to see the teams later in the week. I think the Lions are obviously in a better position as regards having a series wrapped up, and it's probably an easier week for them. There's a bit of pressure on Australia now to make sure they find something to add to what they did last weekend. The challenging part for them is they're going to be missing some players. So yeah, it's hard to do a prediction. I think if you were asking me to call it now, I still think the Lions will probably have that strength and depth, so many options to choose for, as we said, and they'll probably win it. But it should be interesting when we see the teams later in the week, and hopefully we get an exciting one, and that we get a great game. But I suspect Farrell, knowing his great determination and the fantastic job he's done with Ireland for a long period of time now, he's a winner, isn't he, Andy Farrell? And he'll want this team to finish off in style and win the series 3-0.
Super stuff, Alan. Will you enjoy your wine tours and your outback adventures? And we'll chat to you again after that third test and see if the Lions can make it 3-0. Thanks as always.
Cheers. Thanks, Stuart.